Well, hi everybody. Welcome to our video series. I'm Chris Gomez. On Twitter, you can find me as SpaceShot, and we've also got Sean Hornsby with us. And Sean, you're out in California.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
so Southern California, which is where I grew up. We both went to the same high school, and except I'm in Pennsylvania now. I'm in the Philadelphia region. And we're here to talk to you and to each other about becoming a software developer, growing as a software developer. And I think let's get started. Maybe got a little intro that we can set up, right, Sean? I'll start with myself. So, as I said earlier, my name's Chris Gomez, and I've been developing code professionally, working for someone for over 20 years. I actually started about 10 years before that. Just on my own, the kid at home with a PC, writing games because there really wasn't a whole lot else to do other than play that very first version of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Currently, I'm a community speaker. I speak a lot at the Philly.net user group, but I do like to travel around and to the Delaware area. I've been down to Baltimore, and I'm the co-founder of Philly GameWorks, which is a game creators group. We're teaching other developers how to make their first game. And the reason I started it is because it's the group I always wanted to go to. So I said, well, I can't seem to get anybody else to start this group, so I'm just going to have to start it and learn the basics of creating games and try to get others to follow along. And then let's contrast that with your experience, Sean.
yeah. So to your 20 years, I have almost 20 weeks of coding. I put that amateurly, and nobody's paying me to do it. I also started with basic. I don't remember how old I was. Matt and I, my brother and I, we had an Atari, and so we would copy programs out of the the magazines back then, and he stuck with it, and I did not. So I became an electrician. And I did that for a long time, and now I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I'm looking to get back into working, and all of my friends are programmers, so it just felt natural to go that route, I guess.
Yeah. So what's interesting about it is it's probably not the first time that we've talked about it.
It's not. It's not. I've even tried a few times before, probably over the last 5 years or so. I've done a couple, given it two or three shots. I think I did some. We looked at some .NET, or maybe it was just C# at that point. We looked at some WPF. I feel like maybe some other stuff. I read a dozen chapters on one of the Python guides, and was looking at Python a little bit. It just never stuck. I think I wasn't motivated enough to really do anything with it. So
Yeah, plus it's the constant repetition, especially at first, because it's this whole new world and everything's getting thrown at you, and you can get 5 lines of code into your first thing you want to do, and
yeah,
run into a brick wall, and then just not have the motivation to say, okay, how do I get out of this?
definitely. I think one of the pitfalls that I've run into almost every time trying to learn this, and other stuff too that I've tried to learn, is you go in with that enthusiasm, and you get going, and you get a few weeks into it, and you've learned stuff. You hit that wall, and you take a break.
You're right.
And then when you come back to it, now you've fallen behind. You don't remember the stuff that you did already, so you have to go back, which makes it even more boring than it was the first time. As you're doing stuff that you already did, you know that you already did it. Your brain is just like has already chewed it over. So it's definitely that's a pain. And then
And in the past, we were trying to decide what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different technologies, and
Yeah.
and you had that conversation this time too. You didn't just make your choice. I recall that you at least asked a few people, what do you think I should pick?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I thought I want to do this, and I know that there are, in a sense, there are language agnostic ways to learn how to program, but it's going to come down to learning something at some point. Probably easier to pick something and go with it. And I know that in a lot of ways too, it didn't matter if I started with Python or if I started with Ruby, and I learned how to program. I learned the concepts, and I could still move to JavaScript or or graduate upwards into the more formal languages, and not it wouldn't be a problem. But I do feel very time limited. I feel like I need to do it right the first time this time.
Yeah.
So I needed the advice to figure out which language or which stack to get into, and
Right.
what's the way to go.
And I think, my advice has changed over the years, but very recently, I know, I don't know if it was a surprise to you, but like I said, I'm a career Microsoft developer. I write a lot of C# code today, even though I'm a web developer. But I still felt the first language and environment you should learn. The first environment is building websites. But more importantly, like when it comes to a programming language, not just like HTML markup or CSS markup, I very strongly felt JavaScript,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and it had to do with just that there's reach for JavaScript, and I don't know if that surprised you.
It was a bit of a surprise because in the past it has always been, and you weren't dogmatic about it that Microsoft is the only way to go or the best way to go. It's the way you knew. Definitely, it gets the job done, and so it was always kind of like if you're going to learn and if I'm going to learn from you, we're going to go the Microsoft route. And so yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise when you were like, yeah, so learn JavaScript, and I get it because it does feel like in the past few years, and especially in the past years, things are kind of changing. It is way more web driven, way more mobile driven. So it makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I think what we'll be able to look at over time is that at first it's websites, right? At first we're going to build a website and also concentrate on the skills that a web developer or a client front end developer needs today.
Yeah.
But JavaScript has reach back to mobile devices. There's technologies that let you build native apps using JavaScript. So it's really impressive how it's kind of becoming the language for everything in some respects. Um, but that's where we're at. So
Yeah.
it's definitely an interesting time. But now the first thing that happens is you say, okay, I'm going to learn JavaScript, but now the tools debate comes in.
Yeah. And in fact, this I didn't really think about it when I was making this slide, but there was even a step before this in my head. I'm a pretty avid reader. I love having a book in my hands. So my first instinct was to go to books, and I've done that before. And I feel like they're okay. I think you have to be way more motivated. Um, in fact, I may be jumping ahead of myself here because we're going to talk about the text, and then we're going to talk about the assistance and the learning tools. Um, but yeah, that was the other question. And there's a lot. There's obviously big names in the text and the IDEs and whatever's going on. I knew before we even had the discussion about what language to use. What I knew about Visual Studio, obviously. I knew about JetBrains offerings. I think I even knew at that point that WebStorm was going to be the engine for Java, or the environment for JavaScript and HTML, CSS. I'm sure there are others. I had heard of Sublime. I had not at that point heard of the online tools like Cloud9 and I believe the other one's Shift Edit.
Yeah.
And initially, I thought, well, it doesn't matter. For me, it doesn't matter. Let's pick one and go with it. But then I realized that I have a desktop and I have a laptop. And my laptop is a Chromebook. And what that does is it kind of limits you. I can't install Visual Studio or WebStorm or Sublime on my Chromebook. So it really it kind of forced me in a way to pick Cloud9. I
Right.
think actually it forced me to pick a web IDE, and I believe you suggested Cloud9, and it was very simple to start and get into, and it works. And I used that exclusively from my desktop for the first 8 weeks, 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks that I was programming. The funny thing is, it was a big deal to me that I'd be able to use whatever environment on my Chromebook, and I've actually only opened the Chromebook once in that whole time. So recently I've tried a few other things, but yeah, initially it started out with let's pick an environment that I can use,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, and that's where I stuck. And I like Cloud9 a lot.
Yeah, and I've used Cloud9 before. I used it about a year ago I took a real good look at it, and what impressed me about it was is that here comes this IDE that opens up just in your browser. It's connected to GitHub, so that's getting you at least immersed in source control right away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even at the time that I was looking at Cloud9, GitHub wasn't the force that it is today. I mean, I think we'll talk eventually about how GitHub has become this force. It's become like a secondary resume for some folks. It's powering open source projects. Microsoft has just published millions of lines of .NET code to GitHub, and they're
I
developing
saw that.
.NET in the open, and they're developing .NET in the open. um, so yeah, it's definitely pretty neat, and I thought it worked for the Chromebook idea, um,
Yeah.
or even just being on the go, because some of these IDEs aren't free.
Right.
Although that's changing. I mean, Visual
Yeah.
Studio Community is free. These text editors like Sublime or Atom or Brackets are becoming popular, and they're free.
Sublime's
Um,
not free. Sublime costs money, but
oh, that's
I
right.
believe.
Well, Sublime does cost money, although the joke about it is that you download it and it's not time limited. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know what? It's one of those things where they're asking developers to say, hey, we put a lot of work into this.
Yeah.
So if you decide it's going to be your everyday tool, it's reasonably priced though. The days
But
of
yeah,
saying
80 or $90 or something.
yeah, I remember when I got the Wacom C++ compiler, I saved up for it, and I saved several $100s for it, and there was a time when I saved up for a very early MSDN subscription when they weren't as expensive as they are today.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, an ultimate subscription is over $10,000. So, it's just not within the reach of most folks for sure.
Yeah.
But when it came to learning, there's a lot of choices out there too now. In fact, learning has become an industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. In fact, and this is just the selection, and God, it feels like forever ago already. It was Halloween. It was October 31st that I started on Codecademy, and ran through some of their basic skill stuff, and make a website, make an interactive website. Did some of the language skills, HTML and JavaScript stuff, and it's a great introduction. It's gamified, which is a commonality to all of these. So it's very it's easier to learn. I feel like when you're kind of playing a game in a sense, you're motivated to keep going and have the knowledge stick a little bit. It's easy to go back and reference the stuff that you've already done. So yeah, I did that for a while. I'm trying to remember how the next one that came into my purview was Code School, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, you know what it was? It was Jeff asking me if I knew Angular, and I looked up. I went, if you go to Angular, to AngularJS's website, they say, hey, here's how you learn, and it links you right back to Code School. Code School has a free 4-part, I think, course in AngularJS. It's pretty nice. It's there, and I tried a few of the other free offerings, and they have a lot of it's sort of like a more deeper. It's a deeper and more polished version of Codecademy in a way. Very knowledgeable teachers and staff. Obviously, they just got bought by Pluralsight, so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's nice for them. In fact, Pluralsight's not on this slide, but I have looked at Pluralsight recently. More recently, I had looked at them before, but and then through I actually started blogging about what's going on here and learning how to code and on WordPress, and sort of kind of developed or fell into this circle of other people who are sort of in the same boat. They have either other careers or they're stay-at-home parents, and they've just decided to learn how to code, either change professions or just as a hobby. And that's where I started seeing a lot of the Odin project, which is a little heavier focused on Ruby, more than JavaScript. And this free code camp is really new. I think it's super new, actually. And in a way, they're kind of an aggregator. They have laid out like a lesson plan. I believe it's 50 lessons. It's supposed to take some number of hours, 400 hours, or 4,000, I don't remember, 1,000 hours I think is what it was. And you go through the lessons, and at the end, what you can do is start contributing to nonprofit organizations that need help, with their websites or whatever projects. You start just working on stuff. They'll hook you up to do work, free work. But it is in the sense that it's an aggregator. It'll point you at code school courses. It'll point you at another website called Dash that goes over a lot of the front end stuff, the HTML, CSS stuff, and it's pretty nice. It's all a lot of the same in a sense, but they're very complementary. For me, it's nice to be able to do the same techniques, or learn the same stuff, but with a different example. So you're not going over the same thing every day, or every time you have to. If it doesn't stick, if that if that concept doesn't stick, and you go back to Codecademy and you want to let's do the lesson again. It's like, well, this is the third time I've done it, and that kind of boredom and repetition sets in. So it's nice. They're all great. Codecademy is free. Free Codecamp free. Odin Project is free. They're connected to. They're like an offshoot of another branch. Now that I can't remember what, Viking something. That is not free. And Code School is about $30 a month, and then Pluralsight, I can't remember. They're about the same, $30 a month.
Pluralsight's about $30 a month, yeah. And Pluralsight, they're the monster right now. I mean, they bought, like you said, they bought Code School.
They bought a couple other.
They bought it is because they said themselves that they were focused on. They found themselves focused on expert developers.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least people with development experience. You could go there, and while they did have beginning courses like beginning C#, beginning MVC, they weren't down at the beginning level of welcome to your first web page.
Right.
They were never that low level, and so I think they're trying to work into that for sure. But yeah, you had said one thing that you had said is that you started blogging.
Yes.
And I think that's interesting because it's advice that is being given to developers.
There is, in fact, to tie that all together, there is a Pluralsight presentation by Hanselman and someone else that talks about like extending your reach and becoming, getting out there, and that is one of the steps. I kind of stumbled on that last week.
The Hanselman and Rob Connery.
That sounds like it.
Right, called Get Involved.
Yes, it's called Get Involved for sure.
This used to be free. I'm not going to say that it is anymore.
Yeah, I can't remember. I was looking at it during the 72 hours of free everything because of the acquisition, so I don't remember if it's free or not.
And then, like you said people started commenting, right?
Yeah, I started. So I'm on WordPress. It's mushiwork.com, and there's one of the features on WordPress is you can look through the blogs, and it'll kind of tune you into stuff that is similar to what's going on your blog or whatever. So I started finding people. I would find a couple people here and there that were doing something similar, and then I would see other people were commenting, and I would keep just going deeper and deeper, and so there's half a dozen kind of active part-time hobby, not even hobbyists, just switching career type coders that are it's neat because most of them are way further into it than I am. One of them has just gotten her first professional gig. I think she started about a month ago. So it's kind of interesting to see, and maybe it's two of them. It's interesting. There's a sort of diversity through that set of people. Some of them are working professionally, and that's neat because you're seeing that from like a first-time perspective. I can kind of ask them questions like, what should I expect, or what's going on? How is it different than you thought it would be? And some of them are just learning, just not even maybe at this stage not seeking a job because we're pretty new. I don't. And yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I met somebody recently that I didn't know any better. I didn't know that they didn't have 15 years experience. I'd say I'm going to take a just shot in the dark and say he was probably about 6 or 8 years younger than me. So if he came out of college with a CS degree or whatever, he'd already have 15 years under his belt. And he told me, he said, "Oh no, I just got started maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was making a career change." And what's kind of neat is that he just jumped into the community and got involved. And I think what happened is that then here I am, just sort of assuming, making the assumption that like, oh gosh, you must be old hat at this stuff. And it's funny how that you might judge somebody just by what they put on. He'll go to a community event and he'll speak and he'll teach somebody about something. And I'm sure by now, after a good 6 or 8 years at it, that he's beyond the beginning, hello world stuff.
Yeah.
But still, that there is a lot to that. Is that going out there and immersing yourself in the folks that are working in the industry, because those folks eventually are going to be hiring.
Yeah, for sure.
And they get to know you, and eventually somebody will ask you, so what are you working on right now? And
Yeah.
once they get to know you and they say, well, Sean's pretty competent, and then they ask you what you're doing, and you say, oh well, I'm actually looking for my first program. You might get some folks taken aback.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a neat feeling when that happens, because I got involved with the Philly.net community about 8 years ago, and it's funny. On the one hand, there are many times that I feel like maybe I don't really belong up here. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this stuff. I probably don't know nearly as much about this topic as everyone in the room. And then afterwards, folks that I really definitely respect, they come up to me and they just say, "Man, that was great. I really learned a lot. I loved how you explained something." And so you're always fighting that battle of imposter syndrome versus, hey, do I really know this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. That is something I run into. I keep seeing people talk about, and it's people that are starting out. It's people like you and my brother who have 20 years of experience. I think Hanselman talks about it. So it's a little nice to hear that it's like, okay, this isn't just a beginner, foible. This isn't something that it is just affecting me. It affects everyone. So it's good. I have looked a little bit into. I'm trying to find meetups or code groups or hacks, whatever, just whatever out here. I'm having a little trouble finding, it's interesting. I think I have to fine tune my search, but I found some great looking, active looking groups in Santa Monica that meet at 6 o'clock on a weekday night. Or Sherman Oaks. That's quite a drive. So
yeah.
I'll look for something local. I see a lot of stuff in Irvine. I think I just have to start showing up and definitely want to get involved. I think it'll keep me accountable and motivated. So
I also know for sure that there's the SoCal Code Camp, which is pretty large, and I think that it's so large that sometimes it'll be in San Diego, sometimes it'll be at Cal State Fullerton. I think 2 or 3 of them a year, and those can be pretty safe too, because they're almost always free, and then you just sort of go and pick some topics that are interesting to you and sit in on them, and people will start up conversations. Like you won't be able to be a hermit, and just be like, okay, I went to Code Camp, I didn't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it starts. You make the first contact, the first new friend, and it goes from there. So
yeah, I do want to get involved. I think that's the next step, for sure. But yeah, I did start a project. I sort of touched on that I love books, and so I think I kept bugging you guys too about it. Like, when am I ready for books? Am I ready for books? And you're like, no, you're not ready for books. Don't worry about books yet. And then and I couldn't help myself, so I bought a few books. And the ones I bought at the beginning were the Head First JavaScript, and I think it's Java. I don't remember the whole title, but what I liked about it as I flipped through it is it had projects to do. It had little games to do, and they were gonna teach concepts through actually building stuff. And the one they did is Battleship. You built a battleship, a version of Battleship, and so it was pretty neat. I took that, and you had said work on something, pick something, do something. So I picked. I decided I was gonna take that kind of model of the battleship game, the stuff that I knew made sense, a static game, or not static, but not a turn-based game, anyways. And I picked a backgammon.
Yeah, where
And
is
I
that?
a back yeah, where is that? I haven't opened it in a while. It's let me see if I have it here. Um,
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely an ambitious first project because I know I've told you this before, but I actually ran across it earlier today. Someone talking about it as well. That for a first JavaScript project today, nowadays, a lot of times
yeah,
people build like a shopping list,
yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing anybody out there who's getting started with either web development or maybe they're learning a new framework like Angular or Knockout, and they build a shopping list or maybe something to keep track of their movie collection. Although, who's collecting DVDs anymore? So,
Right.
but when I saw what you were doing, I remember thinking like, wow, this is like somebody's fifth or sixth or 10th project. So it's ambitious, but it was pretty cool. It was really neat to see, where it got to.
I'm trying to share it. I don't know if it's gonna do anything but a black screen at this point. But
Hmm.
I don't know why that is. Let me try full screening and see if that. Tell me if it pops up. Maybe not.
No, not yet.
Let me try a different tactic here. I will just do this. Share my entire screen. Who cares? That looks like it may have come up. All
Yeah, I see it over on the left-hand side there.
right. So yeah, that's it. I don't know if you want to push it through, but it's
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah, and so built with HTML, CSS, and basically that
JavaScript.
game board is one big table, right?
It's a yeah. It's actually several tables, just because I didn't want to deal with some of the spacing issues. But each quadrant of the board is its own table, and then there's other little tables, like the dice are a table and the jail cells are a table. And on the far right, you'll see that's how many game pieces you've moved out of play. And it's a very it's a very minimal style, with not a lot of description. I know how to play it because I wrote it. I don't think if I just handed it to somebody it would make a lot of sense. But yeah, it rolls it. You start the game, it rolls the dice. In this case, the dark player is going to get to go first because their die was higher. You can either click the token, the checker you want to move, or the die you want to move, and then you just select the thing. There's some issues with it. It's not enforcing some of the rules at this point, but it plays. So
So you
it's
have your first couple bugs, which means you're like actually a developer.
yeah. In fact, there are some specific bugs, or yeah, I guess they're bugs. There are things that I've thought, oh, I haven't been able to fix yet. If you send somebody to jail, let me see if I can do that here. Actually, I can. No, I can't. I can't do math apparently, and that's 4. That's not going to work either. Well, whatever. I'll just keep moving. See what happens. Maybe eventually I'll be able to. Okay, here we go. So I just sent one of the brown tokens to the jail. It's up there in the little spot there. And then let me see. I think maybe I can do another one. Which way do these go? No, I can't. Whatever. This one. Yeah, maybe I can. Okay, so there's 2 in jail now. I can't do it. If there's a situation where you can't take so the way my game runs is it will move, it will check if you can move into the spot that you're moving into, and if not, it will tell you no, you can't move there, and it'll put the checker back where it picked it up from. When they're in jail, it doesn't. It just throws the checker away. It decrements the count, so you'll see. Oh, maybe I could. Let's see. Now 5 will work also. So it decremented the count, and then it paints the token in. If you get to a spot where you can't, it'll tell you. So here, I'll try one that won't work. This won't work. So you see, it took the checker away, and then it checked, and the column that it was going into, which was this column over here, has too many. You can't capture via the rules of backgammon. That's an invalid move. So it tells you invalid move. You hit OK, it puts the checker back. When you have a jailed token, though, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, here's a good one. So I'm going to pick the 6, which is going to try and put the checker here. Right now you have to click on an actual checker. So it decremented. There's now 0 in the jail, but that was an invalid move. Okay, great. So it put the checker back, but it didn't. So that's the big bug that I'm working on right now, is that that's broken. So it now thinks that there's not one in jail. Now I'm down at checker. I can actually never finish the game as the dark player on this one, because the other thing in backgammon, you have to get all of your checkers into the last quadrant respectively before you can start moving off. It's called bearing off, before you can bear off the checkers. And the way I implement that is it checks. It knows when a token goes into that quadrant, it knows, and when it comes out of that quadrant, it knows. And once you have 15 checkers in there, then you can start taking them off the board. Now Brown only has 14 total checkers, so that's a game-breaking bug. But
yeah. What's really neat though is that Cloud9, this is where you built this.
Yeah, I did. I pulled it open right now through WebStorm, just because I didn't have Cloud9 open. But yeah.
Yeah. And what's neat is that like we've even done this a couple times where I've logged in and you've logged in, and it's not exactly like Google Docs, but it's close, where you can see where I'm typing and where you're typing, and there's a collaboration window where some of our old chats are here.
Yeah.
And then what I really think is interesting about it is I think I need to pick backgammon HTML and run it from there.
You can run it through the index HTML because there is a link to it, but if you run it straight from backgammon, it's a little quicker just because it's better. That is the other issue I had. This initially was going to be like a sandbox page that was going to hold all of my little projects. I was going to put a nice little front end on it to tie it all together. I got a little busy and I didn't do that, so it's a little messy. There's a lot of mess in this project that I could fix for sure. But yeah, it's.
I was hoping that it would start up the web server here.
Is it not doing it? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not able to get it to run the project. I thought that would be kind of neat, just to show that what's just so. I wonder if that's what it is.
Yeah, I'm trying to give you access. I don't know what's going on here. Did it work?
So yeah, as everybody saw, like he just logs in and grants access to the project, and then yeah, here we go. So then you can hit run, and what they do at Cloud9 is they spin up one of their servers, and they spin up an Apache server, and they put. I mean, this is on the internet as I speak, at a real web address.
Yeah.
And then
it may not be publicly accessible, but yes.
I mean, I can click it from here, and I can see, the work, and then you can set breakpoints and run and everything, and
yeah, you can do all the stuff. You can actually do it without, because you can pop it out into its own window, which is nice, gives you more room. You can do it right in Cloud9, and I believe you can run all of the, like if it does I think you can run the Chroma. Now I'm trying to remember if that was in Cloud9 or WebStorm, because it pops it out, and WebStorm for sure will open it in whatever browser you choose, and then you can use like the Chrome Dev Tools. If you pop it into its own page from Cloud9, you can also use the
yeah. So, but what's really interesting to me, what I really like, is that you're in the browser, you have a full development environment, and I think, like you said, once you started using WebStorm, it kind of opened your eyes as to what Cloud9 is still missing, which isn't a knock on Cloud9. It's but I mean, this is still pretty neat. This is still a really neat environment. But then when you hit run, this is on the internet. This is a real link, and it's not a link that you'd publish out or anything. But you could hand it over to a friend on Skype and say, take a look at what I'm working on. And Cloud9 has integration with Git, and with GitHub, so you are able to immediately start putting your code in GitHub.
Yeah, in fact, I cloned it from GitHub, and then now I'm trying to remember. And then I use the Bash whatever. The funny thing is, there's still stuff I use that I don't actually know what it is. I guess it's a terminal. I don't know why it's called Bash. I know the name like rings. It tickles my head in a way that says this is important. I've heard this before. This is a real technology. But yeah, I can go into, I can check my Git status, and it tells me what's going on. I'm up to date. You know, if I needed, I did have to learn a little bit of Git, and with Cloud9, it was seriously a little bit of Git. I learned
Yeah.
how to check my status. I learned how to add files. I could do a commit with a message, and I could push. That was it. I mean, that's all I had to do really, because so it wasn't really source control in the sense that, you know, collaborative source control. Um, it was really just somewhere to store my stuff. Funny story about that, storing my stuff, is I didn't track it that frequently. I would do stuff, but I didn't do it as frequently as I needed to. And one day I opened up Chrome and I clicked on my Cloud9 link, and they were down. They were unresponsive, and I was like in the mood. I had an idea. I was gonna do well. My code's on Git. I'll move to Shift Edit. I'll pull it up in Visual Studio. I'll do some. Oh wait, I haven't committed in over a week. I haven't pushed these files up. This is what I have on GitHub is old. So it made me think a little bit more about frequently pushing, and also what to do if my technology fails. Like what not to put all my eggs in one basket, I guess. Now, that's not to say that Cloud9 is bad. It was seriously down for 2 minutes or something. It wasn't a serious outage. So it was just interesting.
Right, right. But I liked it. I liked it as a way to say. I think for anybody getting started, what's really neat is that you get started without installing anything, so you never have
Yes.
to start searching Google to say, oh, my WebStorm installed. Now what do I do? Or I didn't configure this right, or same with Visual Studio or anything else. It just
Yeah.
works. You can get a GitHub account, and you can quickly be pushing your code to GitHub, and then someone can help you and they can look at it, right? Like I
Yeah.
was able to bring it in and look at it.
And so you mentioned earlier, GitHub is apparently the like a secondary resume for in the development world. So it's nice. It's there. I talk about my GitHub is linked on my blog. I link it everywhere. I want people to look at my code. It's not impressive code by any means, but I don't know. I want people to be able to look at it and be like, well, okay, that it works. Maybe I see what you're talking about or whatever. So it's nice that's there. It's an upside and a downside in a lot of ways. And now I'm not sure. Cloud9, their free account is pretty much all public. I don't think you can lock your projects very well or whatever. And I feel like GitHub's the same way now. I don't even remember if you can have private.
You can, yeah. GitHub private is something you pay for. Private
Yeah. So
repositories.
on the free level, so if that's an issue for you, something to think about. It's not an issue for me. I don't really care. I'm not working on anything proprietary or anything serious, so there's
Right.
that.
And
But
I've
it's nice.
tended to put a lot of stuff up on GitHub as well, just because part of it has really been that, after a while, I used to concentrate on saying, okay, well, I want to set up a source control server for myself. And then you start to get in this hassle of managing all of your own stuff. And who has the time?
Yeah.
So, when it came to saying, if I'm even working on something little,
Right.
just anything little, then I'm just going to throw it in GitHub, because then at a bare minimum, I can come back and look at it later, or
Yeah.
I don't get into that place where is it on my hard drive? Should I keep this around? So, I just have my GitHub account here with some things that I've done. I used to present on Signal R, and so here was my Signal R board game that I presented on,
Hmm.
and just other things that I've been working on. So
Yeah. It's
I've
interesting.
I've gotten advice about how to keep your GitHub account from being so messy that it doesn't really function as a resume.
Yeah. I'll probably have to go through at some point. Well, whatever. It's early in the. There's stuff I
Right.
need to do. So since then, I mean, since those days too, that was early. You can, if you look at my Git, you can see that the first commit was 2 months ago. So it's interesting. I haven't committed. I haven't touched backgammon in a week and a half. That's interesting too. I've learned a lot more about Git and GitHub. Even just in the last week, I was doing Code School's Git stuff, so it didn't all stick. It's a lot to take in, but I did learn about some of the more advanced features of it. So it's interesting. That stuff is there. It's not just. It works very well for me as a solo developer on a project to store my stuff and keep it accessible. But to collaborate, I think I'm gonna have to really pick up the nuances of more advanced Git. So it's interesting.
Yeah, one thing that's changed is that coding has become social activity now, thanks to things like GitHub, where previously it's not that people wouldn't work together on things, it was just not as simple as it is now.
Well, I remember
I've read stories where people have thrown a website up there and then they start getting pull requests for it.
Huh. Yeah. Well, I remember probably the last time before this that we talked about teaching me how to program, and we installed Tortoise SVN, and it worked. I had less grasp of it than I even did when I first started with GitHub. Git and GitHub were way easier to figure out, but I mean Tortoise worked. It was a different model, so I like Git. I like GitHub. It's nice. And once again, too, some of this stuff, just the tools in there, the fact that you can look at how often am I making, am I committing stuff, and what sort of, in a way, it keeps you responsible or accountable again, too. Like, yeah, okay, I haven't done this in a while. What's wrong with me? So, because that's an interesting balance. I think what I'm learning is that's an interesting balance for people at all levels of programming. For me, it's balancing between writing code and learning about code from the ground up. I know Matt talks a lot about being at the management level. I don't even know how much code he writes anymore. I think he deals with a lot more of the the high level stuff and the managing people stuff. But I feel like there's this balance between learning tech, writing code, and maybe there's got to be other stuff involved in it too that keeps you from like you might or talking about it. That's one of the things I saw. Now I can't remember where I saw it. Was that you might end up blogging about code more than you actually program, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's an interesting thought that you've got to balance this all out. So.
Yeah, and you can get into the trap of paralyzing yourself with learning.
Oh, definitely.
Where you just, instead of working today, you just say, well, I'll read more of my book, or it's getting worse now. I'll do another exercise on one of these on Code Academy or Code School. I'll watch another Pluralsight course.
In a lot of ways, they're more rewarding to do. Yeah,
but eventually, I think it is really important that you start a project, you work on it, you finish it, and then it's not that when you finish it, you throw it away. I mean, you could very well say, I want to continue working on this, and I'll start toward a version 2, but I do think it's important to put it somewhere. It doesn't have to be anywhere special, but somewhere where you say to the world, this is my project, I finished it, it's done, you can use it.
Yeah.
And, you don't want to take too long doing it. There's a saying that I've heard a lot of developers say that if you're not embarrassed by your first version, then you released it. You didn't
release it soon enough. Yeah.
You didn't release it soon enough. Right.
Yeah, and that what's interesting.
Viable product.
Yeah, for me, initially when I was learning, it's like HTML and CSS. I mean, this. People probably fall into this trap a lot. They'll say, "Well, I'm learning how to program. I'm learning it." That they're markup languages. They're not programming languages. I think that's maybe like a pedantic thing to talk about. But that being what it is, when I was learning JavaScript, I thought, well, I want to learn vanilla JavaScript. I want to learn this pretty well. I don't want to pollute my brain with even jQuery. I thought, no, I got to learn the concepts, and then I'll learn the workarounds. And then I started learning a little bit of jQuery and a little bit of Angular. I'm like, yeah, these are helpful. I would suggest learning those things. That they make it easier, but in a way more enjoyable to write because things work. Things that you might really struggle with or might take dozens or hundreds of lines to write in JavaScript, you can do pretty intuitively with jQuery, which I feel like is the least amount of pollution. You can certainly throw some Bootstrap in there. You can go the Angular route, which also feels a little bit like you start muddying up your separations a little bit, but it is nice. In fact, I've learned about Angular, and I did a few of the classes on Code School, and I just started trying it out. And then I think with the project that we're working on, I wired it up. I'm like, I just want to see if it works, if it's really as easy as those things, and it is. It took me about 15 minutes to get it working, and then another 15 minutes to actually make. I had to feel my way through some of the stuff. In fact, because we started the project and then you went out of town, and I don't know how to deal with back-end stuff. I just dummied up some data to work with, and JSON to work with, so that I could use it, so I could populate the page with by using Angular. And then the other project I was working on that our friend Jeff is the one who told me to learn Angular in the first place, has me doing is basically turning PDFs into web pages. So I thought there's a lot of repetition of verbiage here, and so I just went in there and spent about 15 minutes again wiring Angular up, just so that I didn't have to keep typing the same things over and over again. I could use their little double curly brace or whatever you call them, mustaches, brackets. I don't know. There are 1,000 different names.
Yeah.
I could use their double binding, their two-way binding to just plop a piece of data in, and then reference it very simply in the on the web page, and I didn't have to worry so much about it. I felt like it felt nice.
Yeah.
But it's very simple, and that is it's low-level Angular. I'm not doing any special tricks with it. I'm not doing like live previews or any crazy like fun stuff that you can do with JavaScript or jQuery or Angular. Probably any of the other stuff. Ember, I believe, gives you the same functionality. So
yeah, there's lots of stuff. Yeah. So you bring up a good point about how you can get trapped into thinking that, well, if I don't really master HTML and master CSS.
Oh, looks like we might have lost you a little bit. I hear you, but I think we lost the video feed. There you are.
Here comes, yeah, but you fall into this trap of thinking that until I've mastered HTML and I've mastered CSS and I've mastered JavaScript, I shouldn't be working on jQuery or whatever. That's actually not true. I mean, you have to find a balance, because there's no question that sometimes you'll struggle without a fundamental, but most of the time at work you don't want to sit in the fundamental level anyway. You want to be at a higher level of abstraction so that you can get work done, you can be productive.
Yeah, that's what I found, and yeah, I definitely changed my view as soon as I started using a little bit of jQuery, and then really, I thought there is a big motivation for me to learn Angular. I don't care as much. I stopped caring as much about like pure JavaScript, and started seeing results and realized that that's motivating on its own, but you also learn a lot better that way because you're still getting stuff done, so you're moving forward. And I'll still pick up some JavaScript stuff, and I'll still pick up a little bit of jQuery stuff, and it's all coming. You just do what works, and I think that's more important than learning everything in this prescribed order.
Right.
Learn
that's good. That's good. I mean, it's great to see. You've only been at it for a couple months, and I think we'll get together more often, and we'll talk about more specific things to try to help people out. But maybe for now, we wrap with kind of an introduction as to what we're doing.
Sure.
And we'll have everybody join us again and pick something a little bit more specific to help people out, maybe getting started with building their first web page or picking their first project, or we could you might see us dive into Angular more closely, or jQuery or something, so that folks can walk away and say, yeah, I can go do that too. I mean, it's a interesting idea, trying to either make a career change or just grow as a developer. And I actually think that hopefully what we can provide is even something for a seasoned developer to get out of it too. So
Definitely.
All right, everybody. Well, good talking to you, Sean, and thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you again soon.
Good night.